What happens when a young woman, forced into a world she never imagined, realizes that the man she feared most carries a secret that could change everything? Thank you so much for watching and for all your comments. Let me know at the end if you like the story, and where you're watching from and why you're following this. The Arizona Territory, 1875. Sarah Miller stood at the edge of the settlement, her hazel eyes fixed on the distant mountains. At 22, she had journeyed west from Boston after her parents' passing, hoping to start anew with her uncle who ran the local trading post. The frontier was nothing like she had imagined, harsher, wilder, yet strangely beautiful in its desolation. "Miss Miller, you shouldn't wander so far from town," called Mr. Thompson, the elderly shopkeeper who had taken a fatherly interest in her welfare. "Apache scouts have been spotted in these parts." Sarah nodded, gathering her skirts as she turned back toward the cluster of wooden buildings that made up Willow Creek. "I was just watching the sunset, Mr. Thompson. It paints the mountains so beautifully here. Beauty can be dangerous in these territories," he warned, escorting her back to the trading post where her uncle waited. Inside, the post was bustling with activity. Cowboys purchasing supplies, settlers trading goods, and her Uncle William bartering with a grizzled prospector. When he spotted Sarah, he frowned. "Where have you been, girl? I told you to help with inventory." "I'm sorry, Uncle, I needed some air." Sarah moved behind the counter, aware of his disapproving gaze. Since arriving 3 months ago, she'd tried to please him, but William Miller was a hard man, embittered by years on the frontier and the loss of his wife to fever. As Sarah arranged jars of preserved goods, the door swung open. The conversation in the trading post died immediately. 3 Apache men entered, their expressions unreadable, their bearing proud. The tallest one, clearly the leader, had piercing black eyes that scanned the room before settling on Sarah. "Chief Wakan," her uncle greeted stiffly. "What brings you to town?" The Apache chief spoke in measured English. "We come to trade." His eyes never left Sarah, who felt a chill run down her spine despite the summer heat. Over the next hour, Sarah observed the careful transaction between her uncle and the Apache. The chief called himself Tahoe, Running Wolf in their language, and though his companions seemed wary, he conducted business with dignified patience. When they finally departed, Sarah released a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. "They won't be trouble," her uncle assured the nervous patrons. "Chief Wakan's people have kept the peace treaty these past 2 years. That night, Sarah wrote in her journal by candlelight, describing the Apache chief with his stoic demeanor and penetrating gaze. There was something in his eyes, not just fierceness, but intelligence, and perhaps a hidden depth she couldn't fathom. 3 days later, the peace shattered. Sarah woke to screams and the smell of smoke. Raiders, not Apache but white bandits dressed as Indians, had attacked the settlement, setting fires and stealing horses. In the chaos, Sarah was separated from her uncle. She ran toward the creek, hoping to hide among the willows, when rough hands grabbed her from behind. "Look what I found!" A bearded man with rotting teeth dragged her toward his horse. Sarah fought, scratching and kicking, but the man was too strong. Suddenly, a war cry split the air. The bandit turned, releasing her as an arrow struck his shoulder. He fell, clutching the wound and cursing. Sarah scrambled away, only to find herself face to face with Chief Wakan and his warriors. The Apache had come not as raiders, but as allies, pursuing the bandits who had been causing trouble on both settler and tribal lands. In the confusion of battle, Sarah found herself pulled onto the chief's horse, his strong arm around her waist as they rode away from the burning settlement. "Wait, my uncle," she protested. "Settlement lost. Too many bandits." Tahoe answered tersely. "You safe with Apache now." As they rode into the mountains, Sarah looked back at the only home she had known in the West, flames reaching toward the dawn sky. She didn't know if her uncle had survived or what fate awaited her among the Apache, but something told her that Chief Wakan, for reasons she couldn't understand, had chosen to save her life amid the chaos. Hours later, they arrived at the Apache encampment. Women emerged from hide-covered wickiups. Children stopped their play to stare at the white woman in their midst. Sarah slid from the horse, legs trembling with exhaustion and fear. "Why did you bring me here?" she asked Tahoe. The chief regarded her solemnly. "Spirits showed me. You belong with Apache now. You become my wife." Sarah's world spun. Your wife? No, I can't. It is decided, he stated, turning to give orders to his people. My mother will prepare you. As Sarah was led away by an elderly Apache woman, she fought back tears. How had her search for a new beginning led to this? Forced to marry a man she didn't know, from a culture worlds apart from her own. Yet as she glanced back at Tahoe, she caught a brief look of uncertainty in his eyes, a flash of vulnerability that made her wonder what lay beneath his fierce exterior. Days passed in the Apache village, each one a lesson in survival and adaptation for Sarah. The chief's mother, whom everyone called Luna, taught her the ways of the tribe, how to grind corn, prepare hides, and recognize healing plants. Though they shared no common language beyond a few words, the old woman showed unexpected kindness, her weathered face occasionally softening when Sarah mastered a new skill. Sarah had been given a small wiki up near Luna's, and to her surprise, Tahoe had not pressed his claim that she would become his wife. Instead, he watched her from afar, his expression unreadable as she gradually found her place among his people. One evening, as Sarah sat alone by a small fire, Tahoe approached and sat across from her. The flames highlighted the strong planes of his face, the proud set of his shoulders. Why haven't you forced me to marry you? Sarah finally asked, the question that had plagued her for days. Tahoe studied her for a long moment. Apache warrior does not force. Wife must come willingly to be true wife. Sarah was startled by his answer. Then why bring me here at all? I saw you in trading post. Eyes like mountain sky after storm. Strong spirit. He paused, searching for words in his limited English. Then vision came. You standing with me as village burned. Knew then you important to future of my people. A vision? Sarah asked skeptically. You brought me here because of a dream. Tahoe's expression hardened slightly. Not dream. Vision. Apache understand what white man does not. The spirits speak if we listen. Sarah looked away, unsure how to respond to his conviction. What about my uncle? The settlement? Scouts say some buildings still stand, some people return. Your uncle lives but is injured. Relief flooded through her. Then I should go back to him. Not safe, Tahoe stated firmly. Bandits still hunt these lands. They return. Here you protected. Protected as what? A captive? A future wife I never agreed to be? Sarah challenged, her fear giving way to frustration. Tahoe stood, his silhouette imposing against the twilight sky. You not prisoner. You guest of chief until you choose. He turned to leave, then stopped. Tomorrow I show you something. Then perhaps you understand. Before dawn the next day, Sarah was awakened by Luna, who helped her dress in Apache garments, a soft buckskin dress and moccasins that were surprisingly comfortable. Outside, Tahoe waited on horseback, a second horse prepared for her. They rode in silence as the sun climbed into the sky, ascending a winding trail into the mountains. When they reached a high ridge, Tahoe dismounted and helped Sarah from her horse. He led her to the edge of a cliff that overlooked a vast valley below. This land of my fathers and their fathers, he said, his voice reverent. Once, Apache roamed free from mountain to desert. Now, white man builds, brings iron horse, cuts trees, kills buffalo. He turned to her, his dark eyes intense. My people disappear like morning mist. I must find way for Apache to live in new world or we die. And how does marrying me help with that? Sarah asked softly. You know white man's ways. Read marks on paper. Speak with traitor words. Can help Apache understand treaties, not be cheated. He hesitated, then added quietly, and I see goodness in you. Respect. Not like soldiers who kill our children or traitors who give poison water to my warriors. Sarah stared at the breathtaking landscape, understanding dawning. You want an interpreter, an advocate. Want partner, Tahoe corrected. Equal in eyes of spirits. They stood in silence for several minutes, the weight of his words settling between them. For the first time, Sarah saw beyond the fierce exterior to the burden Tahoe carried, the responsibility for an entire people's survival in a rapidly changing world. There's something else I must show you, he said finally, leading her back to the horses. They rode for another hour until they came to a small hidden valley where a stream cut through rich grassland. To Sarah's surprise, she saw cattle grazing. Not many, perhaps 30 head, but healthy and well-tended. Your cattle, she asked, confused. Tahoe nodded. Trade for them. Learn white man's ranching. Apache must find new way to feed people when buffalo gone. When government puts us on reservation land. You're preparing for the future, Sarah realized. Adapting. Must adapt or die, Tahoe said simply. Like wolf who changes hunting ground when forest burns. As they returned to the village, Sarah found herself seeing Tahoe differently, not just as a warrior chief, but as a man of vision struggling to preserve his people's way of life, while embracing inevitable change. That night, when Luna brought her evening meal, Sarah asked the old woman to teach her Apache words, making the elderly woman's eyes crinkle with surprised pleasure. Days turned into weeks, and Sarah's understanding of Apache life deepened. She learned that Tahoe had been educated briefly at a mission school before running away, explaining his grasp of English. She discovered the rituals and beliefs that governed tribal life, the deep respect for nature, and the complex social bonds that united the community. She also learned of Tahoe's personal losses, his wife and infant son, killed in a cavalry attack 5 winters past. Luna explained through gestures and the few shared words they now had, that grief had hardened her son, turning him from a laughing youth into the stern leader he now was. One afternoon, as Sarah helped the women prepare a feast for a successful hunt, a commotion at the edge of the camp drew everyone's attention. A group of Apache warriors returned, supporting a badly wounded companion. Sarah recognized the young man as Nahele, Tahoe's cousin. Without thinking, she rushed forward. "Bring him to my wickiup," she directed, falling back on the nursing skills she had learned from her mother in Boston. For hours, Sarah worked alongside Luna to clean and treat Nahele's wounds, a deep gash across his ribs, and what appeared to be a bullet wound in his shoulder. Tahoe stood silent witness, his face grave as Sarah extracted the bullet and stitched the wounds with sinew thread. When finally Nahele rested, feverish but stable, Sarah emerged from the wickiup to find Tahoe waiting alone. "How?" he asked simply. "My mother was a nurse in the war," Sarah explained, washing blood from her hands in a water basin. "I learned from her." Tahoe nodded slowly. "You saved my cousin's life. The tribe will not forget." That night, as Sarah prepared for sleep, exhausted from her efforts, Luna appeared at her doorway. The old woman placed a beautifully beaded necklace around Sarah's neck, touching her cheek in a maternal gesture, before leaving without a word. Sarah fingered the intricate beadwork, understanding it represented acceptance. She was no longer just a white captive but becoming something else, a bridge between two worlds, just as Tahoe had envisioned. The realization brought both comfort and confusion as she drifted into sleep, dreaming of a future she had never imagined. Autumn painted the mountains in fiery hues as Sarah's integration into Apache life continued. She now spoke enough of their language to converse with most tribe members, and her skills as a healer had earned her respect beyond what her connection to Tahoe provided. The children no longer hid when she approached, but instead sought her out, delighting in the stories she told them of faraway places. One crisp morning, as Sarah gathered herbs with 2 Apache women, Kimi and Ayana, she spotted riders approaching the village. Her heart quickened when she recognized the blue uniforms of cavalry soldiers. "We must warn the others," she told her companions, who needed no translation as they quickly gathered their baskets and hurried back to camp. By the time they arrived, Tahoe and several warriors had positioned themselves at the village entrance. Sarah pushed through the gathering crowd to stand beside him. "What do they want?" she asked quietly. Tahoe's jaw was tight. "We will hear their words." The cavalry detachment, led by a lieutenant Sarah didn't recognize, halted at a respectful distance. The young officer dismounted and approached alone, stopping several paces from Tahoe. "Chief Wakan," the lieutenant greeted, removing his hat. "I'm Lieutenant James Foster from Fort Grant. We've come on a matter regarding a missing settler woman." Sarah felt Tahoe tense beside her. "We have reports that during the raid on Willow Creek, a woman named Sarah Miller was taken by Apache warriors," the lieutenant continued. "Her uncle has petitioned the governor to demand her return." Before Tahoe could respond, Sarah stepped forward. "I am Sarah Miller, Lieutenant." The young officer's eyes widened. "Ma'am, are you being held against your will?" We're here to escort you safely back to your uncle. Sarah felt every eye on her. The suspicious glares of the soldiers, the concerned faces of the Apache who had become her friends, and most powerfully, Tahoe's intense gaze that betrayed nothing of his thoughts. I was rescued by Chief Wakan during the raid, Sarah explained carefully. The attackers were not Apache but white bandits disguised as Indians. The chief brought me here for my protection. Nevertheless, ma'am, your uncle is most anxious for your return, Lieutenant Foster insisted. He's recovering from his injuries at Fort Grant and has requested we bring you to him immediately. Sarah hesitated, torn between her duty to her only remaining family and the new life she had begun to build. She glanced at Tahoe, whose face remained impassive, though she had learned to read the subtle tensions in his posture. May I speak with Chief Wakan privately before I answer? She requested. The lieutenant frowned but nodded. Of course, but please understand we have orders to return with you. Sarah walked a short distance away with Tahoe, their backs to the soldiers. My uncle is alive, she said quietly. I must see him. You wish to leave, Tahoe stated, a statement rather than a question, his voice unnaturally flat. I wish to make sure he's well, Sarah corrected, and perhaps I can be more useful to both worlds if I can move between them. Tahoe studied her face. You think soldiers let you return once you leave? Sarah hadn't considered that possibility. I won't let them prevent me if that's what I choose. After a moment, Tahoe nodded once. You must follow your heart's path. If spirits mean for you to return, they will clear the way. Sarah was surprised by the emotion that welled within her at the thought of leaving. I will return, she promised. Give me 3 days with my uncle. Send warriors to the big cottonwood by the river crossing. I will meet them there if I can. Tahoe reached out, his fingertips lightly touching the beaded necklace Luna had given her. Wear this. Remember Apache, who call you friend. Sarah gathered a few belongings and bid farewell to Luna, who pressed a small medicine pouch into her hand with instructions in broken English to keep it close. The old woman's eyes held a warning Sarah couldn't fully understand. The ride to Fort Grant was tense and uncomfortable. Lieutenant Foster attempted polite conversation, but his questions about her captivity made it clear he didn't believe her explanation. Many captives develop sympathies for their captors, Miss Miller, he said gently. It's nothing to be ashamed of. Once you're back among your own kind, those confused feelings will fade. Sarah bit back a sharp retort, knowing argument would only strengthen his conviction. Instead, she asked about her uncle's condition and the rebuilding efforts at Willow Creek. Fort Grant loomed on the horizon by mid-afternoon, a stark collection of wooden buildings surrounded by a high wall. As they rode through the gates, Sarah felt a sense of confinement she had never experienced in the open Apache village. She was escorted to the infirmary where her uncle sat propped up in bed, his legs splinted and bandaged. When he saw her, William Miller's weathered face crumpled with emotion. Sarah, thank God you're alive. He reached for her with trembling hands. When those savages took you, I feared the worst. Sarah embraced him gently, mindful of his injuries. The Apache saved me, Uncle. The raiders who attacked our settlement were white men. William's face hardened. Don't defend them, girl. I know what they're capable of. The things they do to white women. He shuddered. It wasn't like that, Sarah insisted. They treated me with respect. Chief Wakan protected me. Wakan! Her uncle spat the name. That devil's been raiding settlements up and down the territory. The army's just waiting for him to break the treaty so they can put his whole tribe on the reservation where they belong. Sarah pulled back, shocked by his vehemence. That's not true. He's trying to find a peaceful way forward for his people. The argument that followed left Sarah drained and frustrated. Her uncle refused to believe her account, convinced she was suffering from a form of captivity madness. The fort's doctor examined her and spoke to her in the same condescending tone Lieutenant Foster had used, assuring her that her confused loyalties would resolve with time and proper Christian influence. That night, alone in the small room she'd been assigned in the officers' quarters, Sarah stared out at the stars and fingered Luna's medicine pouch. Inside, she found a small carving of an eagle, Tahoe's spirit animal, she realized. Over the next 2 days, Sarah's unease grew. Her uncle spoke of taking her back east, away from the frontier's dangers. The fort commander made it clear she would not be permitted to leave unescorted due to Apache threats in the area. And most disturbing, she overheard a conversation between officers about a planned operation to force Tahoe's band onto reservation land, by any means necessary. On the third morning, Sarah made her decision. Using the skills she had learned among the Apache, she slipped out before dawn, taking a horse from the stable and riding hard for the river crossing. She prayed the warriors Tahoe had promised would be waiting, and that she wasn't too late to warn him of the coming danger. As the cottonwood came into view, Sarah saw no sign of Apache scouts. Her heart sank until a bird call, too perfect to be natural, sounded from the brush. 2 warriors emerged, one of them, Naheli, recovered from his wounds. "The soldiers come," she told them urgently in their language. "We must warn Tahoe." Naheli nodded grimly, helping her onto his horse. As they rode toward the Apache village, Sarah explained what she had overheard. The cavalry planned to surround the camp at dawn the next day, forcing the tribe to surrender or face annihilation. When they reached the village, Tahoe was waiting, as if he had known she would return. His eyes brightened momentarily before turning serious as she delivered her warning. "You risked much to bring this news," he said when she finished. "Why?" Sarah met his gaze steadily. "Because this is where I belong now." For the first time since she had known him, Tahoe smiled, a transformation that softened his entire face and revealed the man he might have been in a more peaceful world. "Then we prepare," he said, turning to give orders for the village's evacuation. "And when we are safe, we will speak of the future, yours and mine." Through the night, the Apache village transformed into a hive of purposeful activity. Women packed essential belongings while warriors prepared horses and weapons. Children were bundled in warm blankets, their solemn eyes reflecting the gravity of the situation they had faced too many times before. Sarah worked alongside Luna, helping the elderly and infirm prepare for the journey. The old woman nodded approvingly as Sarah expertly secured medicine bundles and instructed younger women on which healing plants to gather quickly from the surrounding area. "You Apache now," Luna said in her broken English, the most words she had strung together for Sarah. "My son, see true with heart." Tahoe appeared briefly, conferring with the tribal elders before approaching Sarah. "We leave for the high canyon before moonset," he informed her. "Secret place where soldiers cannot follow with horses." "Will everyone make it?" Sarah asked, concerned for the elderly and the small children. "Apache strong," Tahoe assured her. "Many times we move like wind before storm." His expression softened slightly. "You came back." "I promised I would," Sarah replied simply. A shout from the perimeter interrupted their moment. A young warrior raced into camp with news that made Tahoe's face darken. The cavalry had moved faster than expected. Advance scouts were already in the foothills, just hours away. "We must go now," Tahoe ordered. "Leave what cannot be carried." The evacuation began immediately, families forming a silent procession into the darkness. Sarah helped Luna onto a gentle mare, then mounted her own horse. As they left the village behind, Sarah glanced back at the wickiups and cooking fires, the place that had become her home more than the trading post or even her uncle's house in Boston ever had. Tahoe led them through hidden ravines and narrow passes that seemed impassable in the darkness, but opened just enough for their single-file line to navigate. After several hours of hard riding, they reached a series of switchbacks that climbed steeply into the mountains. "From here we walk," Tahoe announced. "Horses make too much noise on stone." The tribe dismounted, and warriors led the horses away. They would release them far from the trail to confuse any pursuers. The climb that followed tested everyone's endurance. Sarah helped Luna over difficult sections, marveling at the old woman's determination, despite her age and frailty. Dawn was breaking when they finally reached the canyon Tahoe had spoken of, a hidden valley nestled between sheer cliff walls, accessible only through a narrow crevice that could be easily defended. A small stream ran through its center, and ancient stone dwellings built into the cliff face by people, long vanished, offered immediate shelter. "Ancestors' place," Luna explained to Sarah as the tribe began settling in. "Sacred ground, safe place." While the women and children organized the camp, Tahoe and his warriors positioned themselves at strategic points along the approach trail. Sarah helped establish a healing area in one of the stone structures, arranging her medical supplies and herbs that had been hastily gathered. By midday, the The scouts reported cavalry patrols in the lower valleys, searching in expanding circles from the abandoned village. So far, the Apache's trail remained undiscovered, but Sarah knew it was only a matter of time before soldiers found sign of their passage. As twilight approached, Tahoe called a council of elders. To Sarah's surprise, he requested her presence. She sat quietly as they discussed options in their language, now understanding most of what was said. The debate was heated. Some warriors advocated attacking the soldiers, while others argued for continuing deeper into the mountains where no white man had ventured. Finally, Tahoe raised his hand for silence. "Fighting brings more soldiers," he stated firmly. "More dying. This is not the way." "What then?" asked Nahele. "Hide forever in mountains while white man takes all Apache land?" Tahoe turned to Sarah. "You know white man's law. Is there a way for Apache to keep land, keep freedom?" All eyes turned to her, and Sarah felt the weight of their trust. She thought carefully before answering. "There are treaties, but the government often breaks them. However, there are also white men who fight for Indian rights, newspapers that print the truth, lawyers who challenge unjust laws." "How we find these men?" an elder asked skeptically. Sarah straightened her shoulders. "I can help, I can write letters, speak to those with influence. My uncle knows the territorial governor. If I can make him understand the truth about who attacked Willow Creek, perhaps the army will pursue the real criminals instead of innocent Apache." The council fell silent, considering her words. Finally, Luna spoke, her voice carrying surprising authority. "My son had vision of this woman standing between Apache and destruction. Spirits do not send false dreams. She is bridge between worlds." Tahoe nodded slowly. "It is decided. We will try this path of words before path of blood." That night, as the tribe settled into uneasy sleep, Sarah sat beside a small fire with Tahoe. The flickering light cast shadows across his strong features as he carved a piece of wood with practiced hands. "What will happen if your plan fails?" he asked quietly. Sarah watched the stars appear above the canyon walls. "Then we find another way. I won't abandon your people, Tahoe." He set aside his carving, a small eagle similar to the one Luna had given her. "When I took you from Burning Settlement, I thought spirits wanted you as my wife. Now I see truth was larger. You meant to save all Apache. Perhaps both can be true," Sarah said softly, meeting his gaze. Tahoe reached out, touching her cheek with gentle fingers that belied his warrior's strength. Apache Chief asks, "Would Boston woman choose life of hardship with man between two worlds?" Sarah covered his hand with her own. She would, if that man would walk beside her as they build a bridge between those worlds. The next morning, Sarah wrote letters to the territorial governor, to newspaper editors in Tucson and Santa Fe, and finally to her uncle. In each, she detailed the truth about the bandits who had attacked Willow Creek, described the peaceful intentions of Tahoe's people, and pleaded for justice rather than further bloodshed. Nahele volunteered to deliver the messages, using secret paths to reach settlements where they could be posted. As he prepared to leave, Tahoe performed a blessing ceremony, asking the spirits to protect his journey. Days passed into weeks in the hidden canyon. Scouts reported that most cavalry patrols had withdrawn to Fort Grant, though small groups still searched the lower ranges. During this time, the bond between Sarah and Tahoe deepened as they planned for their people's future. Together they imagined a place where the Apache could maintain their traditions while adapting to changing times. Perhaps a ranch like the one Tahoe had started, where they could raise cattle and grow crops while preserving their language and beliefs. Sarah would teach reading and writing to the children, preparing them to navigate the white man's world without losing their heritage. One crisp autumn morning, a scout reported a single rider approaching. Not a soldier, but a civilian on a mule. When the man was brought blindfolded to the canyon, Sarah was astonished to recognize James Morgan, a lawyer from Tucson known for his advocacy of fair treatment for Indian tribes. "Miss Miller," Morgan greeted her, removing his hat. "Your letters caused quite a stir in the territory. When your uncle finally admitted the truth about the raid, the governor ordered an investigation." Hope surged within Sarah. "And? The bandits have been captured. A gang led by a man named Harkins who's wanted in 3 territories. They've confessed to raiding settlements disguised as Indians to cover their tracks." Morgan turned to Tahoe. Chief Wakan, the governor has authorized me to negotiate a new agreement. Your people would receive a land grant, not a reservation, but territory of your own choosing where you can live according to your traditions while under territorial protection. Tahoe's expression remained guarded. White man's promises break like dry twigs. This one comes with the governor's personal guarantee, witnessed by the Territorial Supreme Court, Morgan assured him. And, he added with a smile toward Sarah, with a provision that Mrs. Sarah Miller Wakan be appointed as official liaison between the Apache Nation and the territorial government. Sarah's eyes widened as she translated for the elders. A murmur of approval spread through the gathering. How did you know? She asked Morgan, touching the simple beaded band that now circled her wrist. Tahoe's pledge of marriage. The lawyer smiled. Your uncle mentioned you had written of your intention to marry Chief Wakan. He was reluctant at first, but has come to accept your decision. Weeks later, as winter's first snow dusted the mountains, Tahoe's people settled into their new lands, a fertile valley with access to hunting grounds and water rights secured in writing. A simple ceremony united Sarah and Tahoe according to both Apache tradition and Christian custom, with Morgan serving as witness and Luna blessing the union with sacred eagle feathers. That evening, as they stood together outside their new home, a structure that combined the best elements of wickiup and cabin, Sarah watched the sunset paint the mountains in hues of gold and crimson. The spirits were wise to bring you to me, Tahoe said, his arm strong around her waist. Though they sent a fierce woman with a gentle heart to tame a warrior, Sarah laughed, leaning into his embrace. Perhaps we tamed each other, she suggested, and found strength in becoming something new together. As darkness fell and stars appeared above their valley, Sarah thought of the long journey from Boston that had led her here, not to the life she had imagined, but to one far richer and more meaningful than she could have dreamed. Between two worlds, she and Tahoe would build something unique, a bridge of understanding that might, in its small way, create a path toward peace in this wild, beautiful land they both now called home.